Alright, let's talk about that AMC trailer that dropped recently that furries are up in arms about, really pissed off, upset, and some even saying that the furry fandom is going to be set back decades because of it. Well, what's the trailer in question? Well, it features pretty much the jump scare of the furry community, Kiro the Wolf. And the trailer in question is for a docu-series that'll be releasing on AMC in a month or so from now, titled The Furry Detectives: Unmasking a Monster. New series premieres July 17th, AMC+. You're not really given much context as to what this docu-series or even trailer is about to begin with. You just see the furry detectives unmasking a monster. You can maybe understand a little bit of context to it, but with the thumbnail literally just being Kiro the Wolf's fursuit, yeah, it doesn't set a good precedent for what's to come, or at least what the docu-series is about. But this post was making its rounds on social media, and it's actually how I caught wind of this trailer being dropped as an announcement for the docu-series. However, I was wrong about my assumption on what the docu-series was about, because like everyone, if you look at it without really thinking about it, you'd think that because there's Kiro the Wolf on the thumbnail, and then the title that you really focus on, the part you do, is Unmasking a Monster, and you see furries, you think, oh, this is about how the furry community had one of the worst, most notorious, known furries in the community known as Kiro the Wolf, who was one of the many names in the Zoosadis leaks of September 2018. If you want to learn more about what happened, I highly recommend checking out the Cecil McFly video series called Don't Mess with Dogs, a Zoosadis story, part 1 through 3. The series does an excellent job breaking down pretty much what happened during that period from start to finish, how all the details came to be, and how everything concluded. I'd also recommend checking out Turkey Tom's video on Kiro the Wolf Got Away With It, which I guess kind of explains how things panned out with it. However, outside of first impressions of what the title and thumbnail say for this docu-series that is soon to be, there's a little bit of context, not really a little bit, but a lot of context and nuance that was either omitted from the original post or not known at the time, because if you read the video title a little bit more closely, or even read the video description for the trailer, you'd know that the narrative isn't about Kiro the Wolf, or at least the focus isn't going to be on just that. Yes, it'll probably be a focal point, however, the focus, or at least narrative, is supposed to be on the group of furries known as the Furry Detectives in this case, or in the trailer they mentioned the Furvengers, which the only critique I got, don't call yourself the Furvengers.
We nicknamed ourselves the Furvengers.
Please, don't call it a name, just do the thing. You're doing great as is. Thank you for doing what you do for the furry community, just don't call yourself the Furvengers.
We nicknamed ourselves the Furvengers.
The point being, it's about the furries and those involved in the case who brought light to what was going on in that Zoosadis circle, who were responsible for putting out the leaks, getting the information out there, and doing the absolute best they could to gather whatever information they could to hold these scum accountable for their actions. So specifically, if you haven't seen the trailer yet, I highly recommend you do so, because it actually gives a lot more context as to what this is going to be about if you give it a proper listen about what is being talked about who is being talked to, in what sense, and especially if you read the description of the trailer, you know that the uproar on social media about this docu-series even happening is a little blown out of proportion. Wow, who'd have thought that social media has a tendency to catastrophize over things? So surely. Which, granted, you know, I will say it, I was somewhat responsible for that with my quirky quote retweet. Oh, looks like AMC is losing money and they have to cling on to furries for a quick buck. Granted, there was a little bit of follow-up with a reply of just explaining that we pretty much have to wait and see what's going to happen with this. However, it could very well seem like, with the impression that is given from the title and thumbnail, you think that maybe this is normies or non-furries creating a documentary about one of the most prolific and hated pieces of furry history for the sake of shock value and clicks on a series on AMC. However, if you look a little bit deeper, more specifically in the video description of the trailer, you'd understand that the framework or narrative that is being taken for this docu-series, supposedly, because we don't know what it'll be like at the end of the day until it releases and until we've watched it, you'd know that it really isn't going to be as bad as we all are thinking it will be. So in the video description of the Furry Detective Unmasking a Monster new series premieres July 17th, AMC+, you have a description of a riveting true crime docuseries. The Furry Detectives Unmasking a Monster unpacks the 2018 event known in the furry community as the Furry Zoosadis leaks, which exposed a horrifying conspiracy of animal abuse lurking beneath the fandom's playful exterior. The series follows the pack of dedicated vigilantes who teamed up to bring down the monsters behind the masks, navigating the line between amateur sleuthing and official police investigation. The furry detectives exposed a ring of animal abusers, fought for victims, and defended their community from the evil within. So with that description in mind, do you really think it's going to set back the furry community as far as you think it will, or really at all? You know that mentioning or showing Kiro the Wolf was like a jump scare for the furry community, or at least bringing it up never really offered anything good unless it was actual information about what had happened with it, or at least a covering of the event as best as it could, but not in the sense that it's painted in a negative light towards furries, because the actions of what the community did to out that abhorrent behavior and out an individual that even by many was beloved before then goes to show that the community has its priorities hopefully straight. I mean, none of us are straight, but you know what I mean. Yeah. Happy Pride Month. Now, for those that don't know, Kiro the Wolf was a furry YouTuber back in 2017 to 2018. In fact, one of the biggest at the time. But in September 2018, there was the Furry Zoosadist leaks, in which his name was outed as well as being one of the individuals involved in zoosadism. So he was outed as a zoosadist, an animal abuser. Fucking perfect in every, yeah. And there were a lot of details and information coming out throughout the span of those next few months about what was going on, who Kiro really was, and folks both in and outside of the furry community trying to gather as much information they could about what was going on to try and hold not just Kiro, but the other names leaked in that zoosadist circle accountable for their actions, for their abhorrent, evil, disgusting behavior. And that is something that I think is very much glossed over with regards to the furry community and that subject of Kiro the Wolf. The reaction and action taken by the furry community. How do furries stand on that whole matter? Not just a matter of it's bad negative history about the furry community. However, I feel like what speaks louder about it is the fact that the community did step up and did everything it could to hold these awful people accountable who were saying that they were furries, who partook in the community and who partook in the furry fandom, doing their best to not only rid them of the community, kick them out, disavow, dissociate from them, but also to try and hold them accountable in law for the actions that they committed, with whatever evidence or information was out there with regards to that. But effectively, the furry community ended up kicking out Kiro and many of the other furries in that zoosadist circle, and they're no longer welcome in the community, at least from my knowledge. And that's something that is very rare to see, especially knowing the kind of scope of what the furry fandom is, knowing that it's kind of a welcome community. Anyone can say that they're a furry. It's a self-applied label. However, it's just as much of a label that the community deems is valid or not upon those who apply that label to themselves. And very rarely do you see people effectively get kicked out or ostracized from the furry community for shit that they did. However, this case, along with many others, is one of the times where the furry fandom has effectively kicked out and ostracized members of their community, or at least those who say that they're furries. In the furry fandom is saying, we do not claim him, we do not associate with him, and we do not stand by those actions and that behavior. And that is something that should not be glossed over. I believe that is what the docuseries is going to cover. Not just what happened with Kiro the Wolf being the monster that he was and the many other zoosadists in the circle, but also the furries that went above and beyond, who were instrumental in shedding light on this zoosadist circle and trying to hold those responsible in it accountable for their actions, both in law and as much as they could individually. And that is genuinely where I feel like the misinformation kind of is with this. But this post, with the context of the title and thumbnail of the trailer for the docuseries coming out, has been making its rounds on Twitter, and many furries are very upset that this docuseries is even happening, given the context of what was mentioned or shown on Twitter. And it's not to say that context wasn't given here. This very well could be a case where they believe that the furry fandom is going to be set back decades or years, and when they mean that, it's in terms of like public reputation or public standing with regards to what the furry fandom is about, because this negative, awful history is being brought up and televised on this subscription service, which I didn't know was a thing, because apparently we need more of them. Yeah. The damage that Kiro did was incomprehensible to the community. Incomprehensible, because not only was he at the time a respected and known member that worked with other known names within the YouTube community back in 2018 outside of the furry community, he ended up being a zoophile. But with this announcement being made for the docu-series coming out a month or so from now through this trailer being dropped, furries on social media, more specifically Twitter, were outraged by this. There was an uproar about whether or not this should even be talked about, whether or not it should be covered. What are the intentions with this trailer? Some saying that the furry fandom's reputation is going to be tarnished from this being covered. Now, there is some truth to that to some extent, depending on who it is that is going to potentially use this docu-series, whether it is seen as good or bad, or gives light to what context has been missing on Twitter for a while now. There will be those who will always use it as a gotcha moment against the community. Oh, you guys had Kiro the Wolf. See, furries are no good. And there's some truth to that feeling of wanting the furry fandom's reputation to not be seen as the way it is, knowing the misinformation that is making headlines about the litter box hoax, which is downright not true, or even bills being put out to potentially ban furry behavior from schools, which is non-existent. But with this context in mind, there is this worry from the community that this documentary or docu-series isn't going to do any good in terms of the perception of the community, that people are going to gravitate towards this negative aspect being Kiro the Wolf and the Zoo Sadist leaks, which naturally some people will. We all kind of gravitate towards the one negative thing we see, and the docuseries could very well do a 180 and spin it on how the whole furry community is this, and they had this furry, and make it like one of those videos you see on YouTube of like the dark side of the furry community, where it covers like the carpet sample fursuiter, and then Kiro, and then Hypnotist Sappho, and then whoever else, you know? Like, we've seen those before. And so furries have some very valid worries about what the effect of this docuseries is going to achieve at the end of the day, regardless of intentions going into it. However, I'd like to argue that talking about things in a negative light, in a good sense, in putting a spin on what the community did to handle it, in this case the furry community, the furry detectives that took the initiative to hold this scum accountable, and as the description reads, defend the community from the evil within, I'd like to argue that this is going to do a lot of good for the furry community. It might seem like it's going to do bad, but again, you got to remember that the people who are going to cling to this and not really look further into it are not the people that you want to be pleasing, and also they're just kind of looking to be angry about something or put blame on something or use these points as loosely or as uneducated as they can to make their point that furry bad. I think the furry fandom is mainstream enough where folks understand what it is and what it isn't. And even for those that might not know about Kiro the Wolf and the Zoo Sadist leaks back then, you gotta trust that people are smarter than you think. And those that are not smart, you don't want to waste your time with them. At least that's how it's gone in my book. Some furries were saying that this docuseries doesn't need to be made. The Zoo Sadist leaks of September 2018 have happened, and that sort of history has been over and done with. Not to say that the furry fandom can run from it or they're trying to bury it per se, but it's more of it's been talked about and discussed, and everything that could have been done has been done with regards to Kiro, with regards to that Zoo Sadist group, and even just talking about it. There have been many different YouTube videos and video essays covering the events that have transpired. Some furries have also said that there's no need for even this docuseries to be made in the first place, because the Zoo Sadist leaks and Kiro the Wolf have been talked into oblivion for over half a decade now. It's history that has happened, and only really bringing it up is just going to open up old wounds. However, there was a small group of furries saying, at least in quote retweets and some replies, that the furry fandom deserves what's to come with the negative reception or backlash that it's going to receive for letting or keeping zoophiles and pedophiles and people of this abhorrent nature in the fandom. But they said, you know what, this is your own damn faults. If you didn't excuse borderline zoophilic behavior every single time and blame it on purity culture when you get backlash, yes, joking about Pokemon like that is a problem. I don't know what the fuck the Pokemon Arcanine Talkies joke tweet thing has to do with Kiro the Wolf here, which that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, this is taking the whole actual issue here. One saying, oh, Furries deserve it, but also because they do this other thing that has no relevance to what it is that's being talked about. Again, it feels like it's projecting just a little bit. Some furries were also saying this is yet another example of don't talk to the press because of the context of the trailer, where some footage supposedly from San Francisco Pride in 2024 was used, featuring different fursuiters at the Pride event. And say you're a fursuiter in this documentary trailer and it's associated with Kira the Wolf, you probably don't want to be in the documentary, period. Not wanting any association to a zoophile is pretty reasonable. Some of the fursuiters featured supposedly did not consent to being portrayed in the context that they were. However, some did say that the camera crew or whoever was behind the documentary was that their focus, or at least primary goal, was to paint the furry fandom in a positive light. Granted, I don't think context was given as to what the subject matter was, but you gotta trust what they're saying, and hopefully that does speak a little bit as to what the nature of this documentary is gonna be about. Again, it could be a dude trust me moment, but we'll only find out. Now, despite all these different feelings and takes going around with regards to this trailer, the actual context of it is a lot different than what we're assuming it to be. Granted, it's pretty easy to catastrophize about this as is. Seeing Kira the Wolf in the fucking thumbnail of a documentary announcement, you can assume that it's not going to be good. However, that's assuming, and assuming makes an ass out of you and me. And in this case, yeah, there was some stuff that was assumed and wasn't actually true for what the documentary might actually be about, given some context clues, reading the title a little bit more closely, and even reading the video trailer description. With the context of unmasking a monster and seeing Kira the Wolf, like, yeah, you think the focus is going to be about Kiro, or at least the zoo sadist leaks back in September of 2018, and it's not going to set this narrative towards furries that is going to be positive, that the fandom is this wonderful, awesome place that it is, and that Kira the Wolf was a part of it. However, there's a lot even in that that's omitted to some extent, how the fandom took a stand for what they believe in and what they tolerate, and did everything they could. A lot of furries were instrumental in trying to bring these zoo sadists to justice, to hold them accountable, to out them for this behavior, and effectively kick them out of the furry fandom. Not just ostracize, disavow, dissociate, but genuinely kick them out, like even bully to some extent, but genuinely not wanting them to be a part of that community, because that is not what the community stands by. However, if you watch the trailer and listen closely, you'd understand that the narrative doesn't seem like it's going to be about the process of outing him, or at least the perspective from the folks who were responsible for the leaks, or trying to hold Kiro and the other zoo sadists accountable. I would at least argue that the docuseries is going to be a lot better than we were thinking. I mean, initially, I was going into it with the knowledge that I knew at the time, even before reading the description and knowing a bit more context. My assumption has always been, prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. I don't think it's going to set the furry fandom back. Think about it this way, it's going to happen if you let it happen. If you give up on what the furry fandom means to you and what it means to others. To some extent, saying that it's going to set the furry fandom back and you're not really going to do anything to reverse that means you're kind of giving up on what the furry fandom means, and that it means so much more than whatever might happen. When at the end of the day, you don't know the end result that will happen. It's something to find out. On top of that, at least from my friend Derd, who I love Derd, he said that supposedly this docuseries has been in the works for years now, and only recently did furries catch wind of it. Like, even when I was looking up this trailer, apparently it was announced on Facebook like a month or so ago. It just so happened that on YouTube, it was announced on the AMC page, and furries caught wind of it through this, where it's been announced for at least a month or so now, if not probably more so. So there are some good aspects to this, where the docuseries isn't being put together by just some random Joe Schmo YouTuber who wants to look in on the furry community, make a video about them, and make a quick buck and then leave or something. It's being made by a team that has been doing this for supposedly a few years now. It feels like it's being done in a respectful manner, in a way of highlighting something bad, but in a good way, and showing how there is good even in this topic, which there's not much. There is some good in saying that furries did step up and did what they could to protect the community and to make those aware of this abhorrent evil behavior. That is good, that can be talked about, and genuinely I think that is what is going to happen in this docuseries. However, at the end of the day, we don't really know. But what are Beta's thoughts on this whole thing? What's been marinating up here with regards to this topic? So the first thing is that the docuseries, I feel like, was inevitable. It was going to happen at some point, especially knowing how big of an event the Furry Zoosatus leaks of September 2018 was at the time. It was huge. It was the probably worst time to be on furry social media in general. There were a lot of non-furries and furries talking about this, researching this, making videos on it. A lot of people were talking about it, and everyone had different reactions both in and outside of the furry community, for those that knew. I would also like to read a section of my friend Soatok's blog post about this. He gave some very, very interesting and good thoughts, kind of similar to my own. And this little section of it, I think, is very important to keep in mind with regards to even covering something like this, the efficacy and ethicality of doing it in the first place. Like, what will the reaction be? Is it going to be something good at the end of the day? Because it's talking about something negative. And he has something to say with regards to that. For starters, perpetuating negative peace, sweeping bad actors under the rug instead of dealing with them transparently, is how you get missing stares. Refusing to openly act against, let alone discuss, bad actors is what gives abusers cover to hide and operate within our community. The darkest period in the furry fandom's history wasn't the zoo sadist abuse coming to light. The revelation was the end of the dark period. The dark period was all the time that the abuse was happening, and the people who knew did nothing to stop it, and the rest of us didn't know about it. I think that point is excellent, and it's especially within this perspective that this should be talked about, okay? It is something that should be discussed that happened, and especially the actions that the community took once everything was known. That's something that I think is rarely discussed and very much glossed over, is that there are furries, and I'd like to argue that this is a majority of the community, that did not tolerate or stand for that behavior. And as soon as that was known, then as soon as the rest of us knew about it, everyone was immediately against it and did what they could. I myself, as soon as I learned that my friend was a zoo sadist, which let me tell you, I did not know until I saw those leaks on Twitter. And when I did, I was disgusted. I was just so sick to my stomach because not only someone I trusted lied to me, but they were also the most evil fucking person out there. And they would do something as evil as abuse an animal. And even knowing the context later about the disgusting things that those scum in that group said in those chats, said in those logs that were leaked, I was disgusted and appalled beyond belief. Not only was my trust broken because a good friend of mine ended up lying to me and had this whole dark part of themselves that they hid and practiced while I was their friend, unknowing of any of this. Until eventually it became known, I learned about it, and I was crushed and I was disgusted. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. But the point here is that the furry fandom made it very clear that they do not claim him and they do not stand for zoophiles or abusers in the community. And the furry fandom effectively kicked him out, as much as that is something quite challenging to do in an open community. And occasionally throughout that period, you did have all these YouTubers making videos covering him, or covering other vile furries, ex-furries, the dark side of the furry community. And that is inevitable that some YouTubers and creators will do it, that they'll just kind of cover the negatives without adding that little subtext that, hey, it's not all furries, and the furry community does not believe in this behavior either. But you know, for the sake of it, they just do things for the sake of views and whatnot. But from my understanding, the one thing that the furry community with regards to this subject can agree on is that we are all tired of this. We want it to be over and done with. We don't want to hear or see anything about Kiro ever again. That is a time in history that happened, and it's since been settled. So reasonably, no one wants to see him come up again, regardless of the context, because at the end of the day, it's putting a spotlight or focus on someone who has been since shunned. Also, you got to keep in mind, too, this is AMC+, the docuseries could very well flop, so might be a good thing, but I'm still going to be watching it. This is one time besides like Crunchyroll or something to watch Furry, I'll be subscribing to a video subscription service to see this docuseries when it releases, which will be 3 days before I leave for Austria. So that's what I'll be doing with my time before, packing and watching this docuseries that many are very scared for, but honestly, I don't think is really going to be that bad. Like, realistically, with the context that I know about it or have read from the video and the research that I've done, which I highly recommend you do your own research on this, I don't think it's going to be that bad. I don't think, okay? So if it ends up being bad at the end of the day, it will be, and I'll probably talk about it. I'm probably going to do a video covering it because that is very important to at least discuss and have a sort of breakdown of in terms of, I guess, a realistic approach. Not to say that I'm the only realistic approach out there, but like, I just want to cover this. So I will probably be doing a video follow-up on this in the future. So I feel like all the fallout and outrage that is happening on social media because of this trailer, regardless of context being omitted or not understood or not, really just boils down to that people really care about the furry community, not just about it, but the reputation it has, about it being known as this welcoming, lovely community that we all know it as. And that's why there is this worry that is going to set the furry fandom back. I really don't think, especially where the furry fandom is at now, it's going to set it back. This isn't like the CSI Furry episode releasing in 2001, 2? I can't even remember when it released, but point being, it was pretty impactful what it had to do with the furry fandom being known for what it wasn't. So you got to keep that in mind, and we're also in a completely different time too, so I'd like to think that this will not have that bad of an effect. If it does, I'm wrong and I talk about it. That's it. You know, I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong, but at least from what I understand and the context clues that I am gathering, this is a pretty valid conclusion to come to. I think everyone's feelings with being upset about this or concerned or somewhat skeptical is valid. It's okay to be worried about how a sensitive subject like this that has been brought up and done justice to, either in good ways, in bad ways many times, is going to be handled by non-furries. And this is a perfect transition into one of my favorite topics, which I think is very relevant to the subject, even with Kira the Wolf specifically, the harsh truth about joining the furry fandom. This video that I did a few months ago, I'm really happy with, and I think you should watch and understand with regards to this subject. The topic about it, the discussion, I think is excellent to keep in mind with regards to any sort of controversy, scandal, negative topic within the furry community that might be seen as like setting it back, or might be seen as like problematic towards the future of it. But for those that haven't seen the video, don't know what the subject matter is, I'm gonna leave it in the description below if you want to watch it yourself, but a TLDR of it is it basically covers the double-edged sword of furry, in the sense that where something that's good is also a bad thing. And the good and bad thing in the community, at least one of the main ones, is how welcoming and open it is, in the sense that anyone can apply the furry label of them being a furry to themselves. Anyone can join the furry fandom, but also anyone can join the furry fandom. So it can be welcome to bad actors, and you might not actually know that. And to some extent, even ostracizing someone from the furry community, kicking them out, is hard when it's a self-applied label. You could have someone come in, cause all this damage to it through them being this awful person, and still say they're a furry, or be associated as a furry. And there's only so much that the community can do. And that's why I feel like the definition or label of being a furry isn't just based on what you say about it, but it's also based on how the community views you at large too. But in that video, I discuss this double-edged sword about it in what can you really do if everyone is also welcome, but everyone's also welcome. All you can really do is try to hold those people accountable for the heinous actions that they have committed in the best way that you can, because that speaks numbers compared to sitting there and doing nothing about it and not saying anything. And then on top of that, contribute to the community what you want to see out of it. Because as much as the negativity does speak loud, what speaks louder is the impact and creativity and contributions that all the other members have to it. It's not based entirely on what Kiro or what any of the monsters in the Zeus-Eta circle did. It's based on those that care about the community, okay? That's what it comes down to. Either way, that is pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about with this, so on that note, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this or have any thoughts or feelings about this, be sure to let me know in the comments. Please do so respectfully. It's okay to talk about your feelings and critiques, but just be respectful to other people about it. That's really it. And if you have anything more to add to this that I haven't mentioned already, please be sure to let me know in the comments below. And again, I will be covering the series when it comes out. It might take a while for me to do so because, again, I'm going to Austria like 3 days after the series drops, which if you're going to Austria or you're going to be in Austria, feel free to say hi. I'm really excited, but I'm really nervous, but it's going to be a good con and I'm really, really looking forward to it. So yeah, thank you for watching and have a good day.